Welcome to the show, everybody. Micah with CoronavirusDiaries, and I am fortunate to be able to speak again with Scott Bradley, the owner-operator at East Marine Asia, Phuket, who's now currently in Australia. Scott, how you doing?
All right, good.
So it's been a
Nice
little
to see you
while
again
since we
after a
talked
few
last
weeks.
time. You've had quite a bit of your own stuff going on in your own world, and then now with all the new stuff, it'll be interesting to kind of hear what's new with you and kind of where things are at. You
Yeah, I
mentioned a little
suppose.
bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I suppose it's all got a little bit boring. The COVID virus. There's so many other things going on now that, it's sort of the COVID virus started to get a bit pushed aside.
Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit before we started recording, and curious to hear where things are at with. Is there schools that are happening now? Like what's going on with businesses and like travel and all that for you?
Schools, yeah, schools are open again. They're still, you got to drop your kids off the front. You shouldn't be going in. Parents have got to stay out of the school. Basically, they're still, monitoring things pretty highly about what's going on, and the children, obviously where we are, it's a country town, so there's no infections. There hasn't been anyone that got infected in the area, so we're pretty safe here. So it's good. But basically, yeah, the kids are, at school. It's normal school. That started about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
Everything's sort of back to normal, so the kids are happy. Weather's just gotten cold, that's all. We're coming into the middle of winter, so
I'm
not
guessing
cold like where
you're
you are.
happy to have a little bit more of your time back to yourself instead of being a teacher.
Yeah, trying to catch up a little bit on what's going on back at work, and yeah, getting back, to the office a little bit, so to speak. Trying to help back there what I can.
You said it's becoming colder there. What's colder now? And you're on the east coast of Australia, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we're basically in the first month of winter, so it's 3 months of winter. So next month's the middle of winter, basically. So yeah, we're getting some cold weather. It started to snow on the mountains. It's a fair
Really?
way away to the mountains from where we are, but you still get the wind come up, and it brings the cold air with it.
Wow. Does that mean you got off the water? No more fishing?
No more fishing. I've only been fishing about once in the last month, so yeah, it's been pretty slow.
Yeah.
But
You
never mind,
mentioned
that's all right. It'll come.
you mentioned working with the business back in Thailand. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what's going on with that? I know when we first started doing this, and there was a lot of stuff with just ships moving around and marinas
Yeah.
closed, and that. What's happening with your business and kind of the state of travel with yachts and boats and things?
Yeah, that's all starting to open up. Apparently, on the 1st of July, they're going to allow that all to start again. The Phuket International Airport reopened on the 13th of June, which was like last week.
Wow.
So I don't know who's flying in, but they opened the airport. So I think a couple of the Arab airlines are actually moving in pretty quick to get people out and back in, mainly, I think. But yeah, the airport's still open, but there's still the 14-day quarantine on arrival.
Really?
And you've got to register on an application when you arrive so they can monitor where you are. So there's no way around that. You have to have $100,000 medical insurance and basically be monitored on a 14-day quarantine in a place of their choice where you're going to stay. So, you've got to stay in a hotel or something, which you've got to pay for. And then after the
Go up.
14 days, you're able to move.
So,
Yeah.
so if you wanted to travel back to be back with your business, they're going to say, all right, you're going to stay in this area and we're going to monitor you for 2 weeks and then
Yeah,
go about your life.
that's right. Well, there's two issues still. One is you got to get there. So flights are still pretty limited. The Australian Embassy in Bangkok are arranging flights back to Thailand and obviously back to Sydney and Melbourne and the big capitals and back to Thailand. But they're only allowed to have, I think, 120 passengers on board on the 747s.
Wow.
So they're basically operating at a quarter or just over a quarter capacity. Obviously, because of the seating arrangements, everyone's got a safe distance seating.
Yeah.
And then everyone's got to wear a mask, and you've got to wear a mask in Thailand whenever you go outside. So anywhere public, you've got to wear a mask. It's compulsory. It's still compulsory, and so it's still early days, and they're just hoping that the virus doesn't come back again. The Tourism Authority of Thailand put an announcement out that they were the second best country in the world to handle the COVID virus. So Thailand did really well. I think Vietnam did really well as well, because they really shut down really quick and monitored everything really quick. And I think they were actually the best. I don't know, but I just saw Thailand came in at number 2. So it's pretty good, I suppose, when you think about how many tourists have been traveling through, Thailand, especially around, early months of the year.
It's the mecca for backpackers. They hit all of the region, and they scoot around all the cities. And
correct.
So do you have any? Go ahead.
I think boats will be able to move again next month at some time. That looks like, unless things change again, you don't know. But I think the problem for travelling into Thailand for me is, I think if I get there, if something happens, I can't get back, or I might get stuck. And at the moment, I've got a quarantine here the same for 14 days. And before that, you've got to get a flight, which takes time. Another thing at the moment too is, basically, if I go back, I can, because I have a work permit. But tourism, they're basically still pretty low profile. And I think that'll all start soon if things continue to go well.
Sure.
But I've also, another thing I have to do is I've got to get a medical certificate within 72 hours of travel to say that I'm not infected. And then you can travel, and it's a lot of stuffing around to go back,
So you do a round trip between Australia and Thailand for business, and you end up spending essentially a month in quarantine.
Yes. Well, I'd have to quarantine in Bangkok as well, because there's no flights to Phuket at the moment, and you can't travel from where you land is where you got to quarantine. So if I land in Bangkok, I've got to quarantine in Bangkok. I might be able to go via Dubai or somewhere and land into Phuket direct.
Yeah.
It might be another route. I don't know, but it'd be a long flight. It might be a 3-day flight or something. It'd be really tiring. And of course, sitting around in airports waiting, you don't really want to do that either. This time you want to get on a plane and land and get off.
I can only imagine the kind of the mental gymnastics that you're dealing with, just trying to manage a business and, manage, your next move when there is still this, this element of COVID.
Yes.
Working around the globe. Do you have any sort of time frame for when are you just playing it by ear as far as
I don't think I'm going to be able to get back till about September, because and that's maybe even lucky. I don't know, because at the moment when I'm looking at it, I think to travel back, I don't really have the time to quarantine. And, Phuket will probably ease the quarantine situation off before Australia does, I think. But just booking flights and that at the moment, it could take you a month to get on a flight. I have a friend, he's got a flight to Borneo, and he's been doing the paperwork for work for about 8 weeks now, and he's flying next week. So it's taken him 8 weeks to get organised and to be able to get a seat on a flight and fly to Borneo, somewhere in Malaysia. Borneo in Malaysia. So
I know here in the States, to fly locally in the lower 48, tickets are extraordinarily reasonably priced, like super low price, and for a lot of flights. Internationally, I'm wondering, have you looked at the flights? I haven't even looked at any international flights, but I suppose if they're flying at a quarter capacity, I don't know. Is there?
Yeah, they're not too bad. I think they're probably around the same price, maybe a little bit more expensive. But I saw a one-way ticket was about 950 Australian dollars from Thailand to Sydney, which if you buy a one-way ticket, it's always more expensive anyway. But I think they're just covering costs. The airline's just paying for the fuel and the air crew, because obviously if they've only got 120 people on board, they've probably only got half the air crew on board too. They'd have to have, obviously, the pilots and navigators and everything on board, but the actual air crew, I think they'd be limited, to keep the volume of people in the aircraft down as much as possible.
Sure.
But they definitely, the ambassador's doing a good job in Thailand of doing that, arranging flights. People are getting on, trying to get back home, of course, and they're worried, and they're not going to get back home and something happens again. So they keep talking about these waves. So like Thailand's gone through the first wave, they're waiting for the second wave. It's like, well, who knows it's going to come, so it's strange. Like everyone's, thinking that, this is the first wave, the second wave is what happened in China and what happened in Korea and Japan.
Yeah.
They're looking at what happened. So, but maybe it doesn't happen, so certain
They've
countries.
started loosening restrictions in the States quite a bit. So depending on what state you're in, there's different regulations. There's different rules for wearing masks in public, whether it's indoors or, like outdoors, and what establishments are able to be open and what capacity. So every state has kind of their own rule sets. Some of the earlier adopters of loosening restrictions are suggesting right now that they are seeing a spike in infections, whether or not that's attributed to just more testing. I think it would really require digging into that state-specific processes and workflow. But I have been also some information. One of my colleagues that works with me is doing some digging and research, and it sounds like there's evidence to suggest that it's actually weakening. The virus is becoming weaker, so that even if it does infect people that maybe 3 or 4 months ago would have been high risk, now there's a lower likelihood of them going into like an intensive care unit or being ventilated. It's like the virus is like slowly getting weaker. So it's some positive.
Yeah. Well, most of the pharmacies and the health, the health shops selling all the vitamins and whatnot, they're all out of vitamin C.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get vitamin C. Everyone's pumping vitamin C into their immune system. So I don't know, it might be working. People getting a little bit of, for the flu anyway. I mean, it does help. We all know that, those sort of things help a bit. But they're not going to cure things, but they're going to help the immune system build a bit stronger. And there's certain types of vitamin C which are new in the market, which are stronger and everything, and people have just bought it out. There's nothing left. Health food stores, it's all gone.
I'm curious, what's it like? So vitamins and that is, some vitamins are tough for you to get. What about just food in general and stores and that? And because I know early on, kind of like here in the States, there was like kind of a sweep through where everybody kind of stocked up, piled up. Nobody knew what was happening. It kind of wiped out some stores. Is it tough for you to get anything other than vitamin C?
Yeah, no, we still got plenty of food. I mean, you might have seen in Australia, especially with China, with the foreign trade and everything, what's going on. It's becoming a real issue. I mean, you see what Donald Trump's doing as well, and it's like shut out China, and Australia's getting shut out by China because of firstly when they said they wanted to do a independent inquiry in Wuhan where the virus started. I think Australia was the first country to actually say, let's go and have a look what's going on.
Yeah.
And
so
they
what is happening with that?
Well, the Chinese didn't like it. So there's all these sanctions now. We're not going to buy your meat. So they've closed down deals with some of the big meat export companies. They went into barley. That was in the beginning. And now there's so much going on about what they're doing around here and around the South Pacific with building things in some of the South Pacific islands. And it's all starting to come out what's going on. This is all strange. And they're lending money to basically, the smaller islands in the South Pacific, some of the small countries where they're lending all this money, which they know they're not going to be able to pay it back.
Yeah.
So they just, we just built you a big pier, you didn't pay for it. That's ours now, sort of attitude, which is a bit worrying for the Australian government because they know what they're trying to do. So trying to control. So, and they think they're controlling everyone, but people post things on Facebook. You don't know what's true and what's not, but America and Australia and the UK are still the 3 biggest export markets for us. So basically, the US was something like 900. I don't know, it was how many billions or trillions or whatever it was, and the percentage was like 30-odd%, just one country where we export to, which was the US, and then it was like 20% odd for the UK. So straight away, half of our exports are in 2 countries.
The US likes to consume stuff.
China, it was like 0.6%. And everyone's worried so much about China, and it's 0.6%. So who cares? That's in theory. I mean, obviously there's people who are going to get hurt by it, but I think countries, and I think even your president's doing the right thing in a way, is you've got to be self-sufficient. If you're not, it's a big problem, especially with things like this. If the countries get shut down and you rely too much on other countries, It's
Speaking of the
not good.
president and self-sufficient, I think one thing that's going to happen because of COVID for a lot of countries is looking inward at, how being more self-sufficient, like you had suggested.
Yeah.
I'm curious with Australia, when is your election year? Or is it an election year for you guys as well, or did you just have one, or
I
where?
don't think it is this year, but the current Prime Minister is pretty well liked as well, because everyone makes the wrong decisions, and about what happens everywhere in the world with every president, every prime minister. Someone says something that always goes the wrong way somewhere, but at the end of the day, he's sort of sticking up for his country. So I think anyway. But I don't know much about politics here because I've been living in Thailand so long. But just from what I can see, basically from the public in general, they're pretty happy. Okay, if China doesn't want us,
Yeah, and I'd heard
tell someone who cares. But obviously there is people that care that life, their business depends on it. Certain companies, but the government's just got to find other feeds for them. That's all. Because there's so many other countries around the world, and if China is not going to play ball, you can't just keep giving in to them.
It'll be interesting. I know there's considerable debt that the U.S. has that China owns, and I'm not too sure on the politics on how that all plays out. But yeah, it's definitely something that hopefully the leadership in this country is paying close attention to.
Well, Thailand opened its eyes with tourism as well back probably 2 years ago, maybe 3. China started, obviously, the tourism growth, especially in Thailand, in Phuket, was really high, and Chinese were coming on holidays, and they were buying businesses and setting up companies within Thailand. And of course, when that thing starts to happen, the money doesn't come into Thailand. The tour programs are being pre-booked. They own the tour boats. They own the companies. They own the buses. They fly in on China Airlines. There's no money coming into Thailand. So Thailand did start to open their eyes, and they actually shut a lot of businesses down in Phuket because of that, because they were legally formed companies where, the money was none of it was coming into Thailand. It was all getting, people prepaying their holidays in China, and basically Thailand, they think, oh, we've got a lot of tourists, but no money was there. They're building hotels, everything, just really fast.
Yeah.
Just pumping money in. And I think they've done that in a lot of countries. And it's dangerous.
Yeah, they start to control politics and, the kind of agendas within local governments because of the influence that, that their businesses and their, they have. So it's a tactic. Yeah. But hopefully,
the Australian Navy's got 2 warships in Fiji at the moment because there's a pier there that's getting under conflict a little bit because of the Fijians had it built by the Chinese, and now the Chinese want to take it back because they can't pay for it. And they're saying, well, why do you want to come back here for? But then the Fijians are saying, well, the Australians didn't help out and build it, So it's like, well, yeah, okay. So they wanted a big commercial pier built, and it's all about money. Who's got the money?
Yeah, I remember one time we were out when I was in Thailand. You'd taken me out on a cruise with the crew, and I think it was to go scout out where you guys were going to do one of the King's Cup races. But on the way out, there was this huge undeveloped or unfinished pier that it looked like it could have been amazing, but it started and then got the axe at some point. And it sounds like that might have been something similar in nature to where somebody came in to try to build it.
Correct.
Money wasn't going where they wanted it to go, and they just shut it down and said,
shut it down. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many things. Even there's one big duty-free store, and the owner actually got killed at a football game in the UK. He was in a helicopter.
Wow.
And it was King Power Duty Free. It was the big duty-free chain in Thailand, and they opened a huge store in Phuket. And you see the Chinese busloads going in to this big duty-free place. And it's strange because it's a duty-free building, like a big department store, where all the Chinese are getting shuffled in there to buy all the duty-free because the airport's not big enough for duty-free stores. So they put them all in there and they buy all the duty-free and go home with it. but all that money was getting sent out back to China. So
Global
it's
politics,
business.
Scott. You got to love
Yeah.
how countries and businesses alike can figure out the loopholes. Is there anything that you can share with in regards to your own business, import, export?
Yeah.
I know at one point you were talking about how it was difficult to get stuff into your own certain types of products, and maybe it was just from the States or something that you were talking about, but navigating that.
Well, yeah, well, at the moment we've actually got an order from the States, a container which is getting packed by a big company called West Marine. They are basically, we're buying everything from them, and they're trying to obviously get the stock from their warehouses around the US. But some product can't be shipped within the US. Some of the DG, the chemical products, they can't go over state borders. So we're stuck with a few things we can't get. But again, it's only small parts, and we're getting most of what we need. But shipping's been actually, strangely enough, pretty good. DHL, some of the air freight forwarders, they've all been reasonably good. A few little mistakes here and there with mess ups, because I think some of the key staff are working from home, and then they're not really tracking the shipments correctly and what's going on with pickup and stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, it's for what's happened, it's been, in theory, pretty good. Now sales in store are still reasonable. I'd say they're probably somewhere around the 70 to 80% of what they would be. So it's not bad. I mean, it could be a lot worse. We're not down at half or something like that, but
Sure,
we've still got full overhead, so it's not the greatest. But yeah, everyone's still working. So
the full overhead.
everyone's still got a job.
That's because of rules for staff in Thailand. Is that what you're referring to? And then the building
The
itself?
rules are you're not supposed to shut a business down because of COVID,
Right.
but inevitably, if you're bankrupt or you got no money left, well, you got no choice, have you? So I have one company now which I'm thinking to close, which is the boat building company or the refit center, because it's been hard to operate for the last 3 or 4 years anyway. And that's due to people are spending less on luxury items like boats. You've got the big super yachts and all that. They're still good customers, the bigger boats, but our facility was more targeted at the cruising customer, and the cruising yachts and the people that had more money like 10, 15 years ago. There seemed to be a lot more money floating around in the middle end market of the sailing boats. So, and that's all sort of stopped, in the last, slowly over the last 10 years has slowly gone down, particularly in the last 5. So, those businesses have been a lot of work and no real profit. So it's a lot of time getting put into something that's not giving you anything back. The good times were 10, 15 years ago. We did well. So, yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've definitely been well versed in the industry, and you know when you need to pivot, and you can see things that maybe somebody new in the industry might not be too keen on. So it's interesting to hear your insights and your take on how that stuff works out.
Things changed. Phuket got more expensive. Hotels, the whole cost of living in Phuket, especially for an Asian country, really got expensive. It's still not Singapore or Hong Kong pricing, but it's gotten really, really expensive for cost of living. And of course, then staff need to get higher salaries, and then you need to charge the customer more. And then surrounding countries like Vietnam and that become a better place to actually operate that sort of business, because labour is cheaper, and they're growing in developing countries now. And I see even now with production out of China, a lot of the companies now are moving out of China into Vietnam and Bangladesh. They're the 2 big ones I saw. India as well, of course, but I think iPhone have moved out of China too, and they're building some of their iPhones now in Bangladesh or India. I can't remember. It's one of them. But Vietnam's a real...
When I was looking at some import-export stuff myself, that China's kind of gotten to the point where they recognize the value of the system that they have in place for manufacturing, and it's getting more difficult to get the return on investment from exporting product from there. So a lot of people are transitioning elsewhere, and it'll be interesting to see where the next 5 to 10 years, 10, 20 years bring us in terms of a global marketplace. It's interesting to see where you bring it yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I can, we're actually buying from 6 different companies in China at the moment in a container order, and doing it through the Alibaba system, and it's actually been a nightmare. It's really hard. It's not so easy. It's taken months.
Yeah. The little bit that I started going into that industry, and I was just going to be working with $10,000 or something, an initial investment into trying to get stuff out and do some things, and you just start seeing that there's the devil's really, really in the detail. It there with that you can get nickel and dime to the point where you hemorrhage all of any potential.
Yeah, unless you're in still with any business like that, really high volume in one thing, and you're just ordering off one supplier. But if you start doing little bits and pieces everywhere, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
The time, you save money, but do you, with the time you put into it, what you could have done with that time, before? I'm reading a book at the moment it's actually an Australian guy, and it was a top-selling book. It's called Sell Like Crazy. And he developed this book, and he's got people spend, I think it was at 80% of their time making 20% of their income, and 20% of the time making 80% of their income. So in other words, people are just wasting so much time. And it comes into the book even where the time where you're valuable, you're spending 96 of your percent of time chasing stupid things, and 4% is actually productive.
Yeah. I've heard something very
similar. And that's through everyone in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, and when you start to look at it, I see what my staff are sending me emails, and it's like, yeah, it's just so much wasted time going around now with the tech world, and e-commerce and all the emails going in now. It's just so much wasted time, which is nothing. It's not profiting for the company. It's all just a lot of time wasted.
Heavy as the head that wears the crown.
Yeah. Well, so for our business, we sell paint, and paint is probably, like I just said, it's probably 80% of our income. And the time that goes into it wouldn't even be 20%. Don't think it's even 10. But it's 80% of our business.
Yeah. You're talking about a pretty significant element of business, which is efficiency. So it's
yes.
identifying where you can trim waste and lean up the process a bit. But I know I see we're getting up there in the time. Scott, is there anything that you're hoping we could touch base on before I let you go?
No, not really. Just probably hoping that we can travel soon, and the world gets back to normal after all the problems that are going on. It's too many things at once. And I think for me, obviously the virus, what it did to the world was, I think governments reacted too quickly in the beginning. They should have thought of different ways to shut down areas, of course, where elderly people are, where there's more vulnerability for the virus. But to shut down everyone's businesses and to stop people going and seeing their loved ones. You can't go and see your grandma, she's about to die. You know what I mean? It's like crazy. How can you do that?
Significant policies put in place from the beginning. And on one hand, I can see why they had done it, especially when you see what was being fed to us out of China. Depending on how you view that, whether it was an intentional kind of feed of information or it was just kind of everybody was looking at it as, potentially this epic pandemic. But big learning experience, much like business, I suppose. Yes. But Scott, I really thank you for your time. I appreciate your insights. It'll be interesting to see where you go with the business and, as things gradually open back up. I'm looking forward to being able to connect in person one of these days, hopefully on a yacht in the Gulf somewhere.
Yeah, it'd be good.
For all the viewers and listeners, be sure to check out the information below if you're looking for any yachting, marina supplies. Scott's got the hookup. Scott, thanks again.